So we're back after that brief pause. Little technology glitch. Apologize for that. So again, one more time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Frank Hemming, who's going to lay the groundwork for why the pool trust is so important in terms of Medicaid income and resource levels.
Sure. Thanks, Lou. Numbers haven't changed in the 5 minutes that we were gone, or whatever it was.
They did not.
So if you're a single individual at home, in terms of income, we always talk about income and assets separately. So in terms of income, one individual can have $879 a month of income. Anything above that, we have to do planning for. That's what we're going to talk about the pool trust today. If you're a couple at home, both receiving Medicaid, you don't get $879 times 2. That makes too much sense. So unfortunately, there's a little bit of a reduction there. So a couple at home gets $1,287 combined for monthly income. If you're a spouse at home with a spouse in the nursing home on Medicaid, your total monthly income can be $3,160.50. If you're a person in the nursing home, again, your income allowance is only $50. We've talked about that in previous webinars. And then we talk about resources or assets separately. So again, if you're an individual, you get $15,450 or less to qualify for Medicaid. Your couple, again, at home, if both are receiving Medicaid, you don't take $15,450 times 2. You get the reduction down to $22,800 combined. Or if you're of a community spouse at home, you can have resources between about $75,000 up to about $126,000 combined, depending on how the assets are titled.
Now, if your head is spinning, you're not alone. And yet the question becomes, why are these rules so damn complicated? And the answer is, we didn't make them up. We just live with them and try to navigate them for you. But it is a patchwork quilt of laws that have evolved since 1965. And no, I wasn't practicing, Frank, in 1965. But I was alive then. And so I started my practice in about 1983. And by then, there were multiple laws dealing with Medicaid. And over the last 54 years since Medicaid was enacted, they just keep layering new rules on top of new rules. And they don't go back ever and justify the old rules. So today's session is going to focus on home care in New York State. Because for nursing home care, Frank, the pool trust doesn't help.
No, unfortunately, there's the 5-year look back. When we talk about nursing home, there's no look back for home care. If you have a pooled trust and you're at home and then you unfortunately can't stay at home any longer, your pooled trust doesn't follow you to the nursing home, because any transfers that you would make to a pooled trust if you were in the nursing home would be a transfer or a gift within the 5-year look back period and would result in a period of ineligibility, which we obviously don't want.
So he talks fast.
I do.
We also need to distinguish here whose income it is. And Medicaid uses what we call the name on the check rule. So if money is coming in the name of a husband, that's the husband's income. If it's coming in the name of the wife, that's the wife's income. And if they own a joint account or a joint asset that's producing income, it's generally credited 50-50. So the first thing we have to do if it's a married couple is identify the income sources. Because when we talk about a pool trust, that does not apply to the other spouse's income. It applies only to the Medicaid applicant's income. If the community spouse or the healthy spouse has income over the allowable limits, there is a requested 25% voluntary contribution of that excess income. In many counties, it's not so voluntary. But you can forestall even that 25% contribution using something called spousal refusal. We're not going to get in depth into spousal refusal today. We're going to focus really on the Medicaid applicant's income, but just know that with regard to assets and income, there are a variety of tools available to married couples to shelter both income and resources with regard to Medicaid eligibility. So with that, Frank, let's get into today's topic. We have exempt assets, which you cover very well. So if you want to go through those.
Sure. So again, I'm assuming we're talking about a single individual. So they're allowed their $15,450 allowance of bank accounts, life insurance, cash value, maybe a small brokerage account, something like that. Your home is exempt as long as you or a spouse lives there. Same thing with a disabled child. So typically the house is off limits in terms of a home care situation because If you're receiving home care, most of the time you're going to be in the house. You can have a car regardless of value. You can prepay for your burial and funeral arrangements. If you have income producing property like a business, typically we see these most common where you have a rental property or maybe a duplex where you're receiving rental payments, something like that. If you have a business that's making income, that business is exempt. You have a very small allotment of $1,500 for face value for life insurance. Anything above face value of $1,500, the cash value of that policy then counts against your asset limit. And you have your IRAs, which as long as they're in periodic payment status, which happens automatically when you hit 70 and a half years old, that IRA, the balance of the account is exempt, the income from it is not and could be diverted to the pool trust.
So when we look at Medicaid eligibility, the key number is $15,450. You need to spend down or transfer down below $15,450. Your home, if you're living in it, or you have a spouse or a disabled child or a personal or a caregiver child living in the home, we can exempt the home. And in fact, in some cases, transfer it without penalty. One automobile, prepaid burial and funeral, etc. The one other major item that you see here that is a major asset class is IRAs. And just to reinforce what Frank said, you could have a $1 million IRA and in payment status, meaning you're taking your required minimum distributions, or if you're not yet, we can put it into payment status by beginning payments, even though they're not mandatory on a voluntary basis. But you have to be taking income from the IRA along with an IRS table, or in certain counties, a DSS table, depending upon where you live. That income has to be factored into our calculations here today for the pool trust purposes. Because even though we can exempt the asset, and we have a case right now where we're applying for Medicaid and there's a $5,000 per month mandatory distribution. It's required. So we have to account for that $5,000 per month. In many cases, people go to the Department of Social Services and say, well, I have Social Security, I have a little pension, I have this $5,000 a month monthly payment from my IRA. And they're told promptly,
you don't qualify.
You don't qualify.
Or you have to spend it down. Hopefully you hear that you have to spend it down, at least, and that it's not just a straight denial.
In many cases, that information is just wrong. It's dead wrong. So we're going to talk today about why you can not only get Medicaid if you have more income than that $879 per month, but why you don't have to do what's called an income spend down on a monthly basis because of the pool trust.
Look at that. So a pool trust, it's a special type of trust that allows individuals to become financially eligible for public assistance. So this is the main tool that we use in our Medicaid toolbox to keep people at home, because as you can imagine, if you have household payments to take care of, even just paying your taxes, your electric, your cable, if you have internet, and you want to have something to eat from time to time or buy some clothes, you need a lot more than $879 a month to pay for all those things. So the pool trust is what we use to make sure that a Medicaid applicant's basically the entirety of their monthly income is saved and could be used for anything that the Medicaid person needs.
So think about that. Think about today, you yourself living in your own home on $879 per month. How many of you could do that? Virtually none. So that's what Medicaid requires. It requires that you spend down or transfer down to $879 per month for an individual, and the Medicaid number for couples is even worse.
Yeah, it's only $1,287.
So you don't even multiply by 2. It's $1,287 per month in combined income for Medicaid home care for a couple. So the pool trust is the lifeline. This is the key, the magic pill that gets you to live at home and to keep access to all of your income to pay your other monthly bills, all those, those luxurious items like rent, mortgage payments, taxes, heat, utilities, food, gasoline, travel, trips, all the other things that you require to live can be paid out of the pool trust.
So a pool trust, we talk about it whenever we talk about a pool trust. There's some confusion about what it is, who runs it, who's the trustee of it. So the trust that we talk about from here on out, pool trusts, they're established by a charity, or it's a nonprofit corporation. It has to be under the laws, so that way it is exempt for Medicaid purposes. So the funds from all of the people that have a sub-account with the pooled trust are pooled together, and then the pooled trustee then can use those for joint expenses or payments for all the people within the pool. So that's where the name pooled comes from. But if you think about it, it's pretty much the Medicaid person has their own sub-account, just like you have your own bank account. So that's the easiest way to think about that. And then what's put into the pooled trust, depending on your circumstance, are either your monthly income, if we're talking about an income pooled trust, or in certain circumstances, sometimes it makes sense to use an asset pooled trust, where you want to spend down to that 15,000 number that we keep throwing out there, the 15,450 number for assets, to put some excess assets into the pooled trust for asset purposes to spend down to qualify for Medicaid that way.
And there is an age distinction that we have to make here. The age distinction is 65, kind of a magic age. You get Social Security, theoretically between 62 and 70. You get Medicare at age 65. But the pooled trust statutes, which came into the law back in 1993 through the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, that's what carved out this statutory exception trust for us that allows us to keep income and still qualify for Medicaid. And if you're under 65, you can put income or assets into this pooled trust, and it does not affect your eligibility for Medicaid in any way, shape, or form. So that could be nursing home Medicaid or Medicaid home care. For people over 65, the reason we can put income or assets into the pooled trust is because there is no transfer penalty for Medicaid home care. There is no look-back period. There is no imposition of a period of ineligibility for Medicaid home care with regard to transfers of assets. And Frank, that's one that our clients are also very often misinformed about.
Yeah, I mean, whenever we hear Medicaid, I think most people presume there's the look back or there's the penalty. And that's why most people assume they can't qualify for Medicaid.
Some people say 8 years, some people say 3 years. In actuality, it's 5 years, but it doesn't apply to home care. It only applies to nursing home care.
So that's why at the end of the day, this is why the pooled trust works so well, because it lets people have access to their income or their assets, depending on what circumstance we're talking about. And as long as we can keep someone out of the nursing home, there's no penalties for anything that we're doing.
Right. So when we look at pooled trust contributions, we look at the income over $879 for a single individual or a married couple's income of the Medicaid spouse over a certain amount. And we look at that being contributed to the pooled trust on a month-to-month basis. If they didn't make that contribution, Frank, what would they have to do? And what do they get told they have to do by most social service offices in order to qualify for Medicaid?
So you have to spend down your excess income. So if you have $1,000 excess, you would either have to pay that $1,000 either to your local Department of Social Services office, which that's fine. That's there's no issue with that. But at the end of the day, that still leaves you with $879 to live on, which we don't like.
Let's take a brief step back.
Sure.
How do you get to a point where you know what that excess income is? What's the budgeting process?
So you have to put an entire Medicaid application together with all the supporting documents needed. And that's things like personal identifying information. It's all your current income information. It's all your current asset information. And then you have to receive a determination by the local county Department of Social Service office that actually shows you what your budget is and shows what your spend down is.
And they're going to give you a computer printout that lists all of the income that you've claimed and all the income that they found that you didn't claim, because they're going to do an independent search for some of your income as well. So you can't really hide, and we're not hiding anything here. This is all above board. We're giving full information to the county. But once they establish your budget and they say that you have that $1,000 per month of income over the allowable amount, so over the $879, so you've got $1,879 a month of income, then what do you do?
Then you either pay it directly to the DSS office, or you have to show that you've actually spent it down on medical costs. So you actually have to make the payments to your medical providers and then show the county through showing receipts or any other way that you can document your expenditures that you've actually spent that money down. And only once that is proved will your Medicaid get authorized for the remainder of the month.
And that's each and every month. And that is an enormous burden of record keeping and depositing that money, paying providers. Most people who do the spend down just write the check to the Department of Social Services and just let it go at that. But if you want to itemize, you would pay for things like co-payments for physician visits, prescription medications. If you're receiving home health care, that's really where this comes into play most. You would have to pay an agency for that home health care until you've spent down that $1,000. And then at that point, could be the 15th of the month, could be the 12th of the month, Medicaid begins to pay and pays for the rest of the month. The next month, you have to do it all over again. But with a pooled trust, you simply write that $1,000 check to the trustee of the pool trust. And then what happens?
Essentially, you get Medicaid, which is great. So one of the things that we have to talk to clients about are there are caveats that come with using a pooled trust. So one of the caveats is that anything that's put into the pooled trust has to be used for the sole benefit of the Medicaid recipient. So if it's mom or dad, anything in the pooled trust has to be used for mom or for dad, depending whose pooled trust we're talking about. So there are very few things the pooled trust won't pay for. But one of the things that we get asked frequently about is if mom and dad always gave a birthday gift to you, grandkids, somebody like that, the pooled trust will not pay out a birthday gift, which if you think about it, that doesn't benefit mom or dad, that benefits the recipient of the gift. So that unfortunately they can't do that. The other thing which the pooled trust certainly will not pay for, no ifs, ands, or buts, is they don't make payments for premiums for life insurance policies. So if you have a long-standing MetLife policy that you've had for a long time, or mom and dad have had for a long time, they won't pay the premiums for that because ultimately a life insurance benefits the beneficiary upon that person's death, which again isn't mom or dad.
So those are some of the negatives and some of the things the pooled trust will not pay for. But we have had cases where we have had $11,000 per month going into the pool trust, and we have spent it down. Mm-hmm. Because you can pay for things like home improvements if you own a home. Even if that home is in a trust and you have the right to live in the home, that home is your responsibility. So all of the home expenses, taxes, if you have a mortgage payments, all of those things will qualify as expenditures from the pool trust. If you don't own a home but you're renting, your rental payments will be qualified expenses from the pool trust. And there are a few things that come up. What if you are, and I had this come up in a conversation just last week, if mom is living with you and you are supplying mom with all of her food, utilities, heat, she's living theoretically rent-free just because she's mom. But when it comes time to have money go into the pool trust and to have that money have to come back out to pay for things, is there any way that you could collect room and board for mom from the pool trust? And the answer is?
The answer is yes, and we've done it quite often because we have that exact scenario where somebody's living with another family member, but at the end of the day, we still want to use as many funds as we can from the pool trust, because the other large caveat that comes with using a pool trust is any funds that are in that account upon the death of the Medicaid recipient stays with the pooled trust. So
it goes to the charity.
As much as we like the charities for doing this great service, we don't want them to get any more money at the end of the person's life than they're entitled to.
So we have to be a little bit creative in finding ways to justify the expenses. And we work very closely with a couple of different pool trusts, one in particular, and they do a very good job. They're very flexible. And we do things not only room and board, but caregiver agreements. If you're the child that's paying mom and dad's bills, you're going to the house on a daily basis, you're managing their caregivers, you're managing their medications, you're doing their shopping. We can build an agreement to get you compensated. And you may think, well, I don't want to get paid by my mother for things that I would ordinarily do. But when that money is otherwise just going to the cost of care or ultimately going to a charity, wouldn't it be better to have that money coming back into the household to, in effect, support mom and yourselves in keeping mom there and giving her the best care possible, but being able to do it in a way that you can actually be compensated for it? So there are wonderful programs out there in Medicaid home care that have incorporated this concept. One of them is called the Consumer Directed Assistance Program, where the state Medicaid program, CDPAP they call it, allows you to be paid as a child to be a caregiver. This is along the same lines, a caregiver agreement, doing things for your parent and having that ability to collect income. And it is income, so you're going to report it as such. It's going to be income to you, but it's an excellent way to do the spend down. And in some cases, we have one case we're working on right now where the beneficiaries, husband and wife, and the husband needs Medicaid, but the husband has all of the income and pays all of the bills for the household. So in that case, we're doing another type of agreement, Frank.
Called a household agreement, which basically outlines that the husband's income is going to be used to pay the household expenses, because obviously if the wife doesn't make a lot of income in this case, the husband's income is the only income that there is to pay the monthly expenses for the household. So one word of caution that comes with this is obviously if you're using a pooled trust scenario like we're talking about where you have one spouse with most of the income, we generally like to have a conversation with our pooled trust trustee to make sure that what we want to do is going to all be feasible through the work of the pooled trust.
So these are some of the expenses that the pooled trust can pay for. We've just covered some of the others, the more esoteric ones, which require additional agreements that we prepare for our clients. But food, clothing, shelter, homeowner expenses, rental expenses, geriatric care services, care over and above what Medicaid would provide. So if Medicaid provides you 8 hours, you need 4 more. The trust can actually pay for the additional 4 hours of care. Medical procedures that the government won't pay for, that elective surgery that you want to have. The pooled trust could pay for that. Attorney and guardian fees, so you can actually pay your attorneys. And if you have a guardian, guardians out of that pooled trust. And any other expense typically that is not provided by government benefits. Funeral expenses are a bit tricky.
Yeah, I mean, we like to talk to families about paying for your funeral expenses because it's an allowable spend down. And at some point, funeral expenses are going to be paid, whether it's during lifetime or after someone's passed away. So as long as it's in an irrevocable arrangement, Medicaid typically does not have any issues with that, as long as, one, you prove that it's irrevocable and you provide a copy of the contract. So there are ways to spend down additional pooled trust funds with paying for burial expenses as long as it's irrevocable and you provide the documentation to your local office.
So we have about 3 minutes left. What are some of the limitations, Frank?
Your trustee of the pooled trust, they're the ultimate deciders of what they pay out. So we like to use the pooled trusts that we've worked with before because of their leniency. We can't speak to all the pooled trusts in New York because there are many of them.
We've sent them a lot of business and we get good concessions.
Exactly. But every once in a while, your trustee may not like a certain disbursement. Usually there's workarounds for that. You're obviously you're getting control off the purse strings to a certain degree. Other main issues are there are monthly fees that come with using a pooled trust. The one that we use the most often, they have a monthly fee of about $200 at most to administer their services. But there are pieces that come with funding and fees. The main drawback that we talk to people about and that we've already mentioned is the fact that any assets or any amounts in the pooled trust upon the death of the Medicaid person stays with the charity. So that's why we want to make sure that as much as we put in, just as much is coming out on a monthly basis as much as we can.
So the advantages of the pooled trust are many. The beneficiary receives government assistance. They receive Medicaid on day 1 of the month without having to spend down income or assets. The trustee prepares all of the tax filings. The not-for-profit attorney will draft the necessary legal forms, and we fill them out for our clients, and we get the trust established and then get it approved because you need a disability determination from social services in order to be qualified for a pooled trust. So we take care of all of the groundwork. The trust has some modest startup costs. In many cases, they'll ask for 1 month of the pooled trust contribution. So if you're going to put $1,000 a month in, they'll want $1,000 to start the trust. And it is a very efficient application process. With DSS, the disability determination may take some time, but this is a very easy way to do it. It does have a few disadvantages.
Sure. The no choice of who your trustee is, we've talked about that. there are non-refundable pieces to this. Like, so in Lou's example, the $1,000 contribution, that's non-refundable. You don't get that back. You don't get to use that. That's your one-time contribution to the charity. Obviously, the other things come with it, kind of dealing with somebody who has to administer a large volume of cases. So I think the general turnaround time that I've seen is payments have to be made within 5 business days of them receiving a disbursement request. But obviously, there are some administrative delays with getting your bills paid. So as long as things go in timely, they should be paid timely. But again, you're throwing kind of a third party in the middle of the bill paying procedure there.
And Frank, you do a lot of the Medicaid work here. You have a paralegal, Jennifer DeRosa, who works with you in doing that. What are the things that you perform on a day-to-day basis for clients to help them navigate this Medicaid system?
So we do the entire Medicaid application. We work with clients to get all the documentation. We review everything before it's ever submitted to make sure that we're doing the best job we can to make sure they have everything at the county level when they get the package from us, rather than chasing things after everything's been submitted. The main role that we can assist with the pool trust is not only doing the joinder agreement, but making sure that the disability review is going through smoothly with the Department of Health. And then if there are any other additional documentation, like the caregiver agreement, the room and board agreement, if there's any other ways that we can get money outside of the pooled trust in the best way possible, that's where you can come to us.
So a lot of advocacy is necessary in the Medicaid system, but there are rich benefits there to be had. And it is certainly worth you pursuing them if you're in a situation where you need home health care. And New York's Medicaid home care program is much more generous than virtually any other state. We have up to 24/7 care that can be obtained through the Medicaid program. You have the consumer-directed program where you can actually hire your own aides, or you could go through agencies and use agency care if you don't want to be the coordinator of the care. So all of those nuances we covered in the Medicaid home care webinar that you can go back now and watch to go along with the pool trust. And we are going to now have to close. We're about out of time. And so if you'd like to meet with us, either Frank or myself, and talk about Medicaid or estate planning or any other topic that we do, then we would be happy to meet with you. And you can click there where you see on the screen to request a free consultation. And we also offer care management services through our affiliate Everhome Care Advisors. Nora Barato and Susan Vale are licensed masters in social work. They are ALCA members that are care managers that help our clients navigate the system. And our next Medicaid Monday will be just that. August 12th at noon, we're going to talk about from the hospital to rehab to home care. And this is the transitional planning that is necessary. And I can tell you, this is when people hit the rapids. This is the crisis situation. When mom falls and breaks a hip or suffers a stroke, or dad has an admission to the hospital for whatever reason, and now the hospital discharge planner is giving you a notice telling you they have to be out in 48 hours. You're trying to get them into a good rehab. You're struggling because Medicare may or may not pay for that rehab. And then once the rehab is done, you're struggling to get them coordinated in a home care plan, which has to be in place, obviously, before discharge. So all of that is going to be the topic on August the 12th. So we hope you can join us then. And again, go back to our website where you can find all of our past webinars, our blogs, and our other educational programming at pierrolaw.com, events, and you can register for our upcoming programs there. We do have a program coming up on July 18th, and that is on solo seniors, for seniors who are there without children, without anybody, a caregiver close by. How do they put in place a plan that's going to be successful? So that's our July 18th seminar, and you can go right on our website again at pierrolaw.com and sign up for that. We went a few minutes over, but I hope it was worth it. Frank, thank you.
I think it was.
And we appreciate your time and attention. Thank you for joining us today. And we hope you can join us for our future educational programs.